And so I named this message this morning, our second message in this series, To Speak or Not to Speak. So what can we learn from this prophet 2,600 years ago about speaking out? Should we speak out? Should we not? What do our actions say with our words? So Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 22. Number one, you're taking notes. After seeing God's glory, Ezekiel was called to speak God's message. Ezekiel sees this glory of God and he reacts. He falls on his face in chapter 3 here. And it says a spirit enters into him. And then he's given this strange instruction by God. Okay, I want you to go shut yourself in your house. Cords will be placed upon you so you are bound, and your tongue will cling to the roof of your mouth. Like he's eaten too much peanut butter with no milk, right? He can't speak. All for this purpose, he says, but when I speak with you, I will open your mouth. One of the most interesting things about Ezekiel, though, I think for me, is not only did he speak his messages, but he was tasked with acting them out. So number two, Ezekiel graphically acted out God's messages. Chapter 4, verse 1, he has to perform this siege against Jerusalem. And you, son of man, take a brick, lay it before you, and grave on it a city, even Jerusalem. And put a siege works against it, and build a siege wall against it. Or, reading on, verse 4, he's to lay on his side to bear the punishment of Israel. Did you hear the phrase that kept being repeated in this passage? You shall bear their punishment. So long shall you bear the punishment. Verse 6, you shall bear the punishment. Over and over again, this prophet is bearing the punishment of somebody else. Reminds me of Jesus, right? I think all of these things he's pointing to, these visual representations, point to the ultimate visual representation we have of our faith, the cross. Jesus, a prophet, is put up high on display for all to see with this sign act, this graphic portrayal of a message from God. Number 3, Ezekiel spoke against Jerusalem's rebellious heart and that God would punish them. We see this in chapter 5, 6, and 7, just over and over and over again. They rebelled against God's rules and statutes. Just think of like the 10 Commandments, no other God, one spouse, not lying, all of those things. They rebelled against those. They even rejected those things, didn't walk in God's ways. And then he says this is how they will be punished. He's going to vent his fury and wrath and anger. I will not spare, have no pity. Turn his face from them. This is a hard passage to read or to preach on. There are plenty of things people do today that deserve God's wrath and punishment. Sometimes people need to hear that God is so holy. And we are so sinful, though, that we deserve his wrath and punishment. And it's in the midst of all this wrath talk and hints of the gospel that Ezekiel gives this hope to us, and I think the people back then. Look at chapter 6, verse 8. Yet I will leave some of you alive. I love that little phrase. You find that so often in the Bible. Yet, but God. Yet I will leave some of you alive. When you have among the nations some who escape the sword, and when you are scattered to the countries, then those of you who escape will remember me among the nations, where they are carried captive. How I have been broken over their whoring heart that has departed from me, and over their eyes that go whoring after their idols, and they will be loathsome in their own sight for the evils that they have committed, for all their abominations, and they shall know that I am the Lord. I have not said in vain that I would do this evil to them. It's a heartbreaking picture to think right in the middle there, how I have been broken over their heart. The idea that God himself would be crushed or broken. I mean, it's described almost like a marriage or a relationship, and one is unfaithful, and the hurt, the brokenness that one side feels. God's love for his people was so strong that he was broken. Maybe that's a place to start with people who are in sin and away from God today, to understand the brokenness of God's heart for them. But he gives us hope, and he says, I will leave some of you alive, and the exile that you will go through, it will cause you to remember me. It will cause you to know your sin. And this phrase that keeps coming up in this book, then they will know that I am the Lord. He says, I didn't do all of this in vain or for no purpose. There is a purpose to the pain that you are going through. Over 70 times he says that they will know that I am the Lord. And this is still so true today, is that sometimes God takes us through the wilderness. Sometimes God takes us through pain or cancer or hurt or loss. He allows us to make our own choices of sin that we would know who the real God is. Sometimes we need a wake-up call by tasting the other things, the things that are not God.